has been called the most expensive motion picture ever made.
Hail, Antony's Legion!
It has been called the biggest flop of all time.
You will kneel.
I will what?
On your knees.
It is known as a film that nearly bankrupted a Hollywood studio.
Am I to understand, then, that you feel free to do with me whatever you want? Whenever you want?
And a scandal that sent the press into a feeding frenzy.
Antony, how will I live?
That had the public begging for more.
Everything that I shall ever want to hold or look upon or have or be is here now.
For nearly 4 decades, the story of Cleopatra has been shrouded in rumor and marred by gossip. It is one of the most famous and infamous stories ever put on film.
Where is Egypt?
But behind the spectacle is a true story as compelling and as tragic as anything seen on the screen. It was a story that changed lives, and a film that changed Hollywood forever. To the outside world, Hollywood in 1959 was still the place where dreams and fantasies came true. But unknown to the public and behind the backlot facades was an insidious run of bad luck that was eating away at badly needed profits. In 1948, the U.S. Supreme Court had stripped studios of their theater chains, and the success of television had cut movie audiences by as much as 40%.
The studio system had broken down. If you were in the studio system at 20th in the 40s, there was this huge, successful operation. Now, as it began to fall apart in the middle 50s, it was just entirely different, an entirely different sort of plant.
But of all the surviving studios, none was as vulnerable to the economic crisis as 20th Century Fox. Darryl F. Zanuck, the visionary who had co-founded the studio in 1935, had departed to pursue his own dreams of making independent films in Europe.
Well, Zanuck left, clearly part of it was the change in Hollywood itself. Hollywood's fierce competition with television. They were not allies at the time.
The battle against television was left to Fox president Spiros P. Skouras. But the powerful Greek immigrant wasn't a filmmaker like Zanuck. He was an exhibitor, trying to fill seats.
We have invested the largest sums of money in our history to provide a total of 55 productions for the next 12 months. These productions will be of quality and scope that we believe will appeal to every one of you.
Even with such stars as John Wayne, Elvis Presley, and Marilyn Monroe in the studio's roster, 20th Century Fox struggled to turn a profit. By 1959, the studio was hemorrhaging money thanks to a series of high-profile flops.
They had the Satan Never Sleeps. They had the only John Wayne film not to make money, The Barbarian and the Geisha. It was a terrible, terrible run. We had very, very tough times selling the movies, getting people interested in the movies. It was a company on the edge.
In an effort to rebuild Fox's ailing coffers, Skouras entered negotiations to sell the studio's prized backlot to real estate developers. But selling the property would offer only a brief reprieve from Fox's financial woes. Skouras ordered executive David Brown to search the Fox script library for an idea that could be remade quickly and at minimal expense.
Spiros P. Skouras sent me a memo saying, "Dear Dave," he called me Dave, "we need some big pictures in this brilliant Greek accent. And I went through the list of films that 20th Century Fox made, and there was Cleopatra.
Starring Theda Bara, the 1917 version of Cleopatra had been a stunning success. Brown and Skouras hoped a remake would bring in a tidy profit. But while the executives easily agreed upon Cleopatra as their story, finding a producer proved to be much more difficult.
We could find nobody to produce it until Walter Wanger, a famous producer of his time, walked into my office and said, "There's something I would love to do. It's a subject called Cleopatra." We fell on him.
Walter Wanger was a dapper veteran of the 1930s and 40s whose prolific career had recently derailed, largely due to marital problems with his wife, actress Joan Bennett.
Walter's wife was having an affair with her agent. Walter, who was, I guess, a fairly good marksman, sneaked up on them, caught them in the car, and pumped a bullet in a place where this gentleman would not be able to consummate an affair.
Wanger served a 4-month term for his crime of passion. And in the years since his release, the producer had been relegated to making B-movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Everyone, they're here already! Journey!
But a surprise Oscar-winning hit in 1958 entitled I Want to Live changed Wanger's luck for the better.
And my special thanks to Mr. Walter Wanger, who made this possible. I thank you.
It was thought that another critical success would put the producer's career back on top. But Fox wasn't concerned with critics. What the studio needed was a film that would bring in box office receipts.
They brought out this script that looked like parchment and said, just give us this all over again and we'll make $1 million. But it was basically a silent movie script with no dialogue. And Wanger was appalled.
Wanger was told to rehabilitate the script and get it into theaters as soon as possible. Fox gave Wanger less than $2 million, 64 days, and the run of the studio's back lot to make the picture.
They started clearing the back lots of the Fox lot to build palaces in the preliminary stage of Cleopatra. When Skouras sort of gave the go-ahead for this.
Wanger was also ordered to cast his leading lady from the roster of Fox's affordable contract players. Names suggested included Academy Award winner Joanne Woodward and Joan Collins, who even screen tested for the role.
Alexandria. Well, that's a noble present.
Yes. But I want something greater in exchange. Rome.
And people have said that I am ambitious.
Why? Don't you love me? Don't you want Egypt? Don't you want the world?
But Wanger protested. He had dreamed of making Cleopatra for years and didn't want the film to end up as another sword and sandal quickie. Spending money out of his own pocket, the producer hired Oscar-winning production designer John DeCure to create exotic romantic sketches and models for presentation to Fox executives.
He did a spectacular display of intercorporate salesmanship. He built models, he had sketches done. He showed the executives essentially what they could have if they opened their mind.
Where Wanger saw beauty and vision, the Fox executives saw the possibility of even bigger profits. By mid-1959, Cleopatra's budget had swelled to nearly $5 million. Bigger stars could now be considered for the lead, including Audrey Hepburn, Susan Hayward, and Sophia Loren. But Wanger had another star in mind, Elizabeth Taylor. After 15 years, the violet-eyed actress was about to be released from her contract with MGM. For the first time, she was free to choose the film she wanted to make and negotiate her own terms. Taylor was also famous for her colorful personal life. By the age of 25, she had been married 3 times before being widowed by a plane crash that killed her husband, producer Mike Todd. The public grieved with Taylor over her loss, but the affection of her fans soon soured when the young widow began spending time with Todd's best friend, singer Eddie Fisher, who was, at the time, married to actress Debbie Reynolds.
She was living with the ghost of Mike Todd. And the closest thing to him that she could find to keep that ghost alive was Eddie Fisher. And I believe myself that she married him to marry the ghost of Mike Todd.
Elizabeth Taylor and Eddie Fisher married in Las Vegas on May 12, 1959. The tabloids labeled her a homewrecker, and negative public opinion made Fox wary of hiring her. But an even greater concern for the studio was the actress's reputation for having chronic health problems that often caused expensive delays. Walter Wanger ignored all warnings. While Taylor was in London working on Joseph L. Mankiewicz's production of Tennessee Williams' Suddenly last summer, the actress received a phone call from Hollywood.
The phone rang and it was Walter Wanger asking her if she'd like to play Cleopatra. And Elizabeth thought that was ridiculous. Eddie had taken the call and turned to her apparently and said what Wanger wanted, and Elizabeth said, "Tell him I'll do it for $1 million." And Wanger said,
to 20th Century Fox executive producer Buddy Adler. The occasion, the Hollywood signing of the exotic Elizabeth for the most exotic role in her career, and the role Cleopatra, the most fascinating woman of history who exclaimed, "There's beggary in the love that can be reckoned," whom Anthony called my serpent of the Nile, of whom Shakespeare wrote, "Age cannot wither her, nor custom stale her infinite variety." What a role! And Liz is the gal to do it justice.
On October 15, 1959, 20th Century Fox became the first studio ever to pay a star $1 million for a single role.
There are two misfortunes in life, not getting what you want and getting what you want. And we got what we wanted.
Whatever fears Skouras had about Elizabeth Taylor's hefty paycheck were quelled by his heartfelt notion that with her, as Cleopatra, Fox would have a guaranteed hit.
Stars are worth money because studios need something that will give them some security, some hope of security that this will work.
Taylor's final contract made 2 more demands. Cleopatra had to be filmed out of the country, and Cleopatra had to be shot in TAD-AO, a 70mm technology developed by her late husband and which she now owned. Skouras happily obliged his glamorous new star. While Taylor finished her final MGM film, Butterfield 8, co-starring Lawrence Harvey and Eddie Fisher, Wanger and Skouras hired veteran screenwriter Nigel Balchin. Now all Fox needed was a director. Skouras and Wanger turned to their friend, 62-year-old Rouben Mamoulian, a veteran known for his romantic filmmaking, but not for directing large-scale epics.
Rouben Mamoulian was an old-time director, mainly famous for films he had done in the 30s. He was known for having been able to coach great performances out of temperamental beauties like Greta Garbo. He was also a friend of Spiros Skouras, a personal friend, so he got the job. He was a great visual artist.
Cleopatra now had a star, a director, and a script. And 20th Century Fox had a lot on the line. Spiro Skouras knew Cleopatra would either be the hit Fox needed or a disaster that would close the studio doors forever. With $1 million of Cleopatra's budget earmarked for Elizabeth Taylor, Spiro Skouras was eager to keep a tight rein on the film's escalating budget. To satisfy Taylor's request that Cleopatra be filmed abroad, the studio searched for exotic foreign locales. Fox considered Italy and Turkey before finally choosing Pinewood Studios in England as the setting for ancient Rome, despite the serious objections of director Rouben Mamoulian.
Everyone considered the weather. London has great studio facilities, Pinewood and other studios, and had all the resources to make a big movie.
At that time, the government had in place tax concessions called the Edie Plan, whereby if a certain amount of British crew and cast were involved in the production, then the British government will put up monies towards the production.
With the government subsidizing his production, Mamoulian had to build his cast from the pool of available British talent. At Taylor's request, 44-year-old Peter Finch, a veteran film and stage actor, was hired to play Caesar. The pair had worked together on the 1954 film Elephant Walk. For the role of Mark Antony, Mamoulian turned to 32-year-old Stephen Boyd, an actor who had won acclaim for his role as Messala in 1959's Ben-Hur. As Caesar's opportunistic nephew, Octavian, Mamoulian cast Keith Baxter, a respected British stage actor.
It was going to be 8 weeks in England, and it was £2,000 a week, which was a king's ransom to me then. It was a lot of money.
With much of the cast and crew now in place, a small fortune was spent testing various costumes.
The Pinewood footage shows, in some very short scenes, Peter Finch in uniform as a Roman general, and he looks very commanding.
The money that was being shelled out was absolutely unbelievable. And I had a very grand robe for when I became Imperial Caesar at the end. And it was embroidered with oak leaves and laurels, and it was embroidered by the women the seamstresses who had embroidered the Queen's coronation gown. And they had made 4 of them.
On the Pinewood Studios back lot, $600,000 was spent transforming 20 acres of English farmland into the port city of Alexandria, Egypt.
They'd flooded this huge area, only to a depth about 18 inches, but it looked like this great harbor, and these huge temples and statues.
The job was so vast that the production couldn't find enough plasterers in the small town of Iver, Buckinghamshire. The art department resorted to running ads in cinemas around the country in an effort to recruit more construction workers. On September 28, 1960, the cameras finally rolled. But the first day of principal photography was a disaster. The British Hairdressers Union disrupted the shoot by walking out, in protest over the presence of Hollywood hairstylist Sidney Gilleroff. The union pointed out that contractually only its members could work on the film set.
Elizabeth Taylor insisted on him without checking with English regulations, which stated by law that if they were to participate in the Edie Plan, they had to provide those services. She said, no, I'm not going to have it.
Eager to avoid the heavy cost of lost production days, Wanger struck a deal with the union. Gilleroff would do Taylor's hair at her hotel, and the union would touch it up on the set. But with the settlement of one crisis came yet another: weather.
London was an insane place to have done this from the start. I mean, a lot of Cleopatra was filmed outdoors, and they could never shoot. I mean, they'd get everything ready, and then it would rain just a little, but that would be enough to kill it. The weather conditions were impossible.
These huge temples and statues, all peeling papier-mâché. Every day they would peel down. Every morning the crew would be painting them up again.
The severe weather also had a troubling effect on Elizabeth Taylor.
She never was well enough to really appear in other than costume tests for this film. She was carried to the set. She was so ill. She'd do a few costume tests and then be carried back. And she was always, always sick during this time.
Taylor's illness slowly turned from a slight cold into a raging fever. The star was quickly attended by several doctors, including the Queen's physician, Lord Evans. With Taylor unable to work, Mamoulian began to shoot around his star.
They were looking for things to film. There was a lot to film for Finch, and some with Stephen Boyd, exterior stuff, but they couldn't do any of the interior scenes because his scenes were mostly with her, obviously.
And action!
But they had me to film, so I did these scenes, but very little. I shot a part of my arrival in Alexandria after the defeat of Antony.
Walker!
The focus of the film was so much on Cleopatra. There was so little that could be done that she wasn't in.
Desperate to make the best of a bad situation, Mamoulian focused on using the Grand Alexandria set and the army of extras hired for the film. On October 14th, the director gathered 1,000 extras in the frosty British night to film this scene, Caesar's evening arrival in Alexandria. Bad choices, worse luck, and Elizabeth Taylor's persistent illness were beginning to cost the studio dearly. By October 24th, Fox executives estimated that the production was losing over $100,000 per day.
Spiros Skouras used to come down and wander around with his worry beads. Well, I think you meant to just sort of lightly fondle worry beads. Well, he was twirling them like a stripper with her tassels, and one day they just broke and went all over the... They're my worry beads! They're my worry beads! For God's sake, get my worry beads! Didn't save the picture.
By November 18th, no more scenes could be shot without Taylor, and to continue without her, the script had to be rewritten.
The rewrites were arriving every day, and pink pages, blue pages, green pages like a snowstorm, and when one went down to do these costume tests, Mamoulian was sitting in a corner with some scribe, writing something. That was a nightmare.
There came a point where they had to shut the production down because they had shot everything they could without Miss Taylor's presence on set.
Production was put on hold for 1 month, time enough for Taylor to recover and for the script to receive a badly needed rewrite. To that end, the studio brought in Academy Award-winning screenwriter Nunnally Johnson. He was paid $140,000 to polish the script. But Mamoulian also wanted his own writer on board, leaving Johnson with nothing to do but cash his hefty paycheck. In January 1961, production resumed as Elizabeth Taylor returned from her vacation well enough to work. Among the first shots filmed was this test set inside a worn Egyptian spa. But in sharp contrast to Cleopatra's steamy bathtub was the cold rain of the English winter. It quickly ate away at the desert vegetation that had been brought in to evoke ancient Egypt.
The palm trees, which had been imported, kept wilting, and every day flight loads of more palms were actually being imported to replace the wilting ones. The weather took its toll on the sets, and they started to disintegrate.
Such production disasters caused delays and fueled tensions on the set. especially with co-star Peter Finch.
It got to a point where he thought he was going mad. He would spend long hours in the green room at Pinewood and get absolutely paralytic drunk. And it got to a point where he'd just sit in the middle of the green room and just stare for hours on end.
These delays also gave the stars time to reconsider the script, which Taylor and Finch found appalling.
Mamoulian liked that script. Elizabeth Taylor and Peter Finch didn't. They couldn't act it. It was unactable.
Once again using her clout, Elizabeth Taylor demanded a script. On January 18, 1961, Rouben Mamoulian left the production, having spent 16 weeks and $7 million, and leaving behind only 10 minutes of usable film. Once again, 20th Century Fox faced a major decision: shut down the production for good or salvage the film. Spiros Skouras decided to roll the dice one more time.
Why didn't we give up when we had spent relatively little money? Because in the movie business, and particularly then, naivete and compulsive behavior were the order of the day, and the inmates ran the asylum. And so we never gave up on an obsession, because we were fueled by the idea that every obsession makes money.
The first step in salvaging 20th Century Fox's huge investment in Cleopatra was to hire a new director. But the studio's choices were limited by Elizabeth Taylor's contract.
Fox had given her another thing that no actor had at that time, which was director approval. It was unheard of. And she said, I approve two directors, George Stevens or Joe Mankiewicz.
With George Stevens busy directing the greatest story ever told, Fox executives turned to Joseph L. Mankiewicz. Mankiewicz had successfully directed Taylor in Suddenly last summer, proof enough for the studio that he could work with the star and help her deliver an outstanding performance. The director was also well qualified to rehabilitate Mamoulian's troubled script. A decade earlier, Mankiewicz had won back-to-back Oscars for both writing and directing A Letter to Three Wives and All About Eve. But in 1961, the 52-year-old director was enjoying the peace and quiet of actor Hume Cronin's island getaway.
He was holed up in his room, and the telephone rang, and it was a call from Hollywood, and they asked for Joe, and I said, he's working, and the voice said, I don't care if he's on the cam, get him.
His first reaction was no, 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 but they kept calling back and begged him to at least have a meeting with Skouras.
Skouras knew every man had his price, but this one proved to be exceptionally high. The Fox president made Mankiewicz an offer worth several $1 million.
And Joe, in one of the worst decisions of his life, said yes, that he would.
Hollywood clamored with the news that the acclaimed director had signed on to helm the film. It was the first good press the production had received in a long time.
The big thing for all of us was that it was now going to be Joe Mankiewicz who would write. So the buzz was that the picture would be one of the biggest pictures of all time.
On February 1st, 1961, less than a month after Mamoulian's departure, Joseph L. Mankiewicz arrived in London to take the reins of Cleopatra.
Joseph L. Mankiewicz was on his way to his hotel and saw the Pinewood sets, stopped off and saw them, and it has been reported that he felt they were a garish nightmare.
But bad weather continued to plague Elizabeth Taylor. On March 4th, she was laid up at the Dorchester Hotel recovering from the Asian flu when the illness unexpectedly turned into pneumonia.
She's being cared for by a nurse, and she went into a coma in the hotel. And the nurse called the hotel, and there was a party for a young medical student going on. And at that party was one of the top resuscitationists in London. And he rushed up and tried to resuscitate her.
As the actress slipped in and out of consciousness, she was rushed to the London clinic where doctors struggled to revive her.
It was even reported in papers that she had died. She was given an hour to live. Skouras called up sobbing, "My God, how did it happen?"
The ailing actress did not die. Although during one close call, surgeons had to perform an emergency tracheotomy to save her life. Faced with a long recovery, Taylor returned to the United States. It was the kind of news that made headlines, even though Fox executives could only see more red ink.
Back in the United States after her brush with death in London, Elizabeth Taylor is carried from her plane in a wheelchair. The arrival at New York of the actress, who was in England to play the title role in Cleopatra, is graphically filmed. She takes the excitement like the true trooper she is, though she's still weak from her bout with an exceptionally virulent form of pneumonia. And now, representing a triumph for the will to live, she's off to California for a long rest in which fully to recuperate.
In a certain way, her illness caused Dad to go on the script. He thought, I have enough time, which of course he didn't.
Instead of patching and polishing Rouben Mamoulian's awkward script, Mankiewicz decided to start from scratch. As he wrote, Taylor's brave struggle to recover her health earned her the forgiveness of her harshest critics and the recognition of her peers. On April 17, 1961, Elizabeth Taylor received the year's Best Actress Award for her performance in Butterfield 8.
I don't really know how to express my gratitude for this and for everything.
Some critics speculated that the statue was given more for her ailments than her acting.
You've now got an Oscar-winning talent. That's as close to a sure thing as you're going to get in an industry where there's almost constant anxiety and terror about what the next disaster is going to be.
Taylor's Oscar offered Skouras further hope that Fox's investment in the actress would pay off. But the studio chief's improved outlook vanished when insurance companies refused to cover the chronically ill actress. They suggested alternate stars to the studio, including Marilyn Monroe.
Oftentimes when a star is uninsurable, it means their potential for trouble is that much greater, and obviously there's a huge risk in going forward.
But with over $12 million already committed to the project, Fox had no choice but to press on. As Taylor prepared to return to work, Mankiewicz began echoing sentiments expressed months earlier by Rouben Mamoulian. London could not double for Rome or Egypt. Elizabeth Taylor's husband, Eddie Fisher, also pushed for a change. He felt a warm climate would bolster his wife's fragile health. Fox gave in. The London set was closed, and the studio agreed to consider other, warmer locales.
Now, as the film is not to be made in England, after all, the set is being dismantled. But the fall of Alexandria here is not the end of the story. The film must be made. This ancient city must rise again elsewhere. It was all for Cleopatra.
They weren't sure where they were going to shoot it. Was it going to be in Hollywood? And they thought about that for a while. Would they build the whole thing on the Fox back lot? That was scrapped. They felt that by going to Rome, I think Elizabeth wanted to have it done in Rome too, so we went to Rome.
As it had 2,000 years earlier, Rome once again played host to Cleopatra. The production moved to Cinecittà Studios, located just 6 miles outside the city. Here, Mankiewicz worked 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, overseeing every facet of pre-production, including the massive construction of sets by production designer John DeCure.
My father called him the city planner. And Johnny loved to build big. And he was a brilliant man. Johnny built a Roman Forum, which I think is 3 times the size of the real Roman Forum, because it was just thought that the real Roman Forum was just not impressive enough.
The scope of construction was so vast that Cleopatra caused a country-wide shortage of building materials in Italy. The sets weren't only grand in scale, every detail was attended to no matter the cost.
They had used actual gold leaf to create the figures of the weird birds and mythological characters in a deep blue. So this glittering gold in the deep blue was breathtaking.
Adding to the pressures of pre-production, casting changes became necessary when, after nearly a year of waiting, Peter Finch and Stephen Boyd bowed out of the revamped project, citing previous obligations.
Laurence Olivier was the next thought for Caesar, but he had a commitment with the National Theater. Then came Rex. He had done several films with Rex, and he loved Rex as an actor.
Rex Harrison jumped at the chance to work with Mankiewicz again. The 53-year-old actor had been a disciple of George Bernard Shaw, and it was Shaw's Caesar and Cleopatra that would serve as the basis for the first part of the story. With Taylor's health recovered and Harrison on board, the only principal role left to cast was that of Mark Antony. Mankiewicz turned to 36-year-old Richard Burton, who had starred in Fox's 1953 hit The Robe. The Welsh-born actor was known as a gifted performer with a dynamic screen presence.
Richard was playing King Arthur in Camelot on Broadway. So Fox then approached the management of the musical and said, "We are prepared to buy Richard's contract." And the management of Camelot, being no fools, quoted some absolutely gigantic sum of money.
After spending $250,000 to pry Burton loose from his Camelot contract, the international cast was rounded out with established character actors including Roddy McDowall, Martin Landau, Carol O'Connor, and Hume Cronin.
There are very few dates I remember, but that I remember. We arrived together on September the 19th. I was signed for 10 weeks. It turned out that I was there 10.5 months.
Added to the mix were dozens of production technicians from England and the United States. Thousands of extras were hired to prepare for the massive battle scenes and intricate choreography. Over 20,000 different costumes were issued, only a fraction of which had been salvaged from the Pinewood Studios production. Almost immediately, producer Walter Wanger faced yet another labor dispute when the female extras complained about their overly tight and revealing costumes. By June 6th, the production was spending nearly $70,000 per day. Cleopatra was already $3 million more expensive than Ben-Hur.
When I first got there, the picture was going to cost $11 million, and then Spiros Skouras was flying back and forth, and every time he went to New York, it went up $1 million. By the time he came back, it went up another $1 million. So then it was $13 million, then it was $15 million.
Wanger and Mankiewicz suspected Skouras was hiding the escalating cost from Fox shareholders for fear of being blamed, or perhaps being removed from power.
Joe and Skouras were having a meeting, and he wanted a budget. And he'd looked at it and said, "I can't go back to America with this budget. It's too much." Joe said, "No, it's going to cost much more than you have now. And if you want to call it, I think you should call the production off right now. Here, Spiros, here's the telephone." Well, of course, he didn't.
The wily studio chief did, however, pressure the production accountant to draft a budget that appeared smaller, so that he could take it back to the Fox shareholders in New York.
The production accountant said, "I cannot give you such a budget." So they said, "Fine, you're fired." So he was put on the next plane back, and presumably another accountant was obtained who was far more flexible.
Before leaving Rome on September 21st, 1961, Spiro Skouras pressured Mankiewicz to begin filming immediately. The Fox president needed footage to show board members that progress was being made. But Mankiewicz hadn't even written half of the new screenplay.
My father was not a quick writer, and he wrote very long and in longhand as well, and he never had a chance to cut the script. He never had a chance to go from a first draft to a second draft, much less a third draft.
The director begged Skouras to give him more time to write, but the studio president couldn't afford to wait. On November 17, 1961, Elizabeth Taylor would go into overtime at a rate of $50,000 per week.
The temptation is pretty strong, especially if you need a big movie and time is running out. You say, all right, let's just go and solve this problem as we're going. It's like the worst possible scenario.
Rolling.
On September 29, 1961, more than a year after the false start in London, Joseph L. Mankiewicz rolled cameras on Cleopatra.
Hey.
Elizabeth Taylor showed up for work in good health and in high spirits.
We've gotten off to a bad start, haven't we? I've done nothing but rub you the wrong way.
I'm not sure I want to be rubbed by you at all, young lady.
Over the following weeks, most of the scenes focused on the relationship between young Cleopatra and her mentor, Julius Caesar, played by Rex Harrison.
Oh, it's you.
You wanted to see me?
I summoned you yesterday to an audience in my throne room. I was told I was not permitted to go there.
For one thing, it's too close understood.
Watching the dailies in New York, Spiro Skouras was reassured Cleopatra would be worth all the money he was pouring into it. On the other side of the globe, Mankiewicz squeezed every minute out of his exhausting production schedule to work on the script. He even scribbled new scenes between takes. But with so little of the screenplay finished, scenes were shot in the order written, not the order that maximized the use of actors, locations, or crews. Sets that had been built on overtime sat vacant and unused. The chaotic schedule even caused many actors to sit around waiting for work.
I'm always amazed. Actor and crew alike spent months at high salaries and prodigal expense accounts, doing nothing.
To relieve their boredom, many cast members toured Rome's sights and indulged in luxurious getaways available in the countryside.
I was obviously going to be there for a long time, and I bought a car. And on weekends, I would escape either up or down the coast and hope to regain my sanity.
As Fox executives read the daily shooting schedules, they began to worry that Cleopatra was spiraling out of control. Wanger and Mankiewicz defended their actions, claiming they were at tremendous cost, were tossed aside at the actor's convenience, including a walking stick made for the character of Theodotus, played by Herbert Berghoff.
It was beautiful. Herbert, at the end of a couple of run-throughs, walked up to Joe and said, "Joe, do I need this stick?" And Joe said, "No, get rid of it." Herbert came up to me after the scene was shot and he said, "That's what's wrong with this picture, Martin." I said, "What?" He said, "This picture is full of such sticks."
For her dressing room, Elizabeth Taylor was given an entire building outfitted to meet her every need. And although she wasn't in Hollywood, Hollywood came to her.
The Chile from Chasen's Air Express to Rome, all the stuff that went on.
But Taylor wasn't the only actor to be given the royal treatment.
I think at one point we looked and there was something like 40 or 50 cars and drivers. I mean, it was just, you were nothing if you didn't have a car and driver.
When the company attempted to cut back on drivers, including Rex Harrison's, the actor threatened not to show up for work. His chauffeur was quickly reinstated.
I think as a star, he probably felt obliged to compete at that level, and I think anybody who didn't fight for the appropriate car, the appropriate villa, or the appropriate billing probably got kicked around.
The set of Cleopatra became a mecca for Rome's social elite and for visiting dignitaries from around the world.
The big event of the season was the film getting made there. I mean, there was a regular sort of squadron of visitors all the time watching what was going on, and parties were given for everybody, and the local paid press, you know, was following everybody's every move.
Art Buchwald came onto the set and he wrote, when you're in Rome, you have to see the Colosseum, you have to see the Roman Forum, you have to visit the set of Cleopatra. Unfortunately, the first two are readily available. The third is very difficult, and he would go through the machinations you had to go through to get on the set.
Back in Hollywood, Fox executives loved the attention the press had begun lavishing on the film.
As a former executive, I can inform you, executives never have a positive effect. They have a negative effect. On the other hand, they have a job to do.
But for some, the micromanagement and budget pressures proved too much.
Dad had a wonderful, wonderful production manager who had been with him for years and done many pictures with him, named Johnny Johnston, who unfortunately died of a heart attack, principally, I think, from the strain of this movie.
Hey, Mark.
Johnston's job tracking costs would remain unfilled for months. In the meantime, money poured out of the production virtually unchecked.
When you have a film of that size budget, the money goes somewhere, and not always on screen. Some of it went into private hands.
We would have production meetings in the morning. Corruption would be discovered. Schedules, as they used to say, completely ignored. And, oh yes, it'll all be taken care of. And, of course, nobody ever followed up.
Hunting down corruption fell to Walter Wanger, but the producer wasn't even aware of what was going on set, let alone in the ledger books.
Walter would take me gently by the arm and lead me away and say, now tell me, what does Joe really feel about blah, 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 blah? Or what did Elizabeth say that... I didn't know what Elizabeth said. What Joe really felt, I did know, but I wasn't about to reveal it. So I would double talk. And he recognized this as an evasion tactic. And so I became the bearded hypocrite.
What Cleopatra needed was the A-type personality in the role of producer, and he just did not have the health to carry it off. And so consequently, he retired from the fray and let Mankiewicz do the battling.
Wanger became a figurehead, while Mankiewicz, in addition to his other duties, became the de facto producer.
He, generally speaking, wrote at night after we had wrapped at the end of the day. By that time, of course, he had been the producer in the morning and the director during the rest of the day, and was frankly exhausted.
I've never seen a man work harder in my life. He was so determined to make this a good movie.
On October 16th, the director prepared for what he hoped would be the biggest spectacle in cinematic history, Cleopatra's entrance into Rome. Every detail was attended to by craftsmen, from costumes to elaborate props and intricate dance routines. The sequence would be the most complex to date. The script called for the Queen of the Nile to ride through the Arch of Titus atop a 28-foot-tall sphinx as thousands of extras cheered. But as cameras prepared to roll, a woman riding one of the elephants slipped and fell to the ground.
An elephant's skin is not silky smooth. In fact, it's like rough sandpaper. And the girl had practically no clothing on. So as she went down, and it took most of the skin off her bottom and the back of her legs.
After the injured extra was given medical attention and replaced, the director finally called action.
And as they came along, Mark Antony was to grab the girl, embrace her, and place her on the next elephant that came by. And what he didn't know was he grabbed her. She weighed 40 pounds more. And he staggered back and suddenly found himself up to his navel in azaleas.
The bad luck continued when the director of photography announced a problem of his own. A critical problem that would send the entire production into a tailspin.
Leon Shamroy, the very crabby cameraman, said, no, can't shoot this, can't shoot this. The light's coming from the wrong way, the shadows are wrong, everything else is wrong.
To the untrained eye, the footage shot looked stunning. But to Shamroy's eye, the sequence was filled with slight imperfections. Cleopatra's entry into Rome would have to be delayed 6 months until the Roman light would properly fill the mammoth set. Luckily, there was enough of the scene shot to help Spiros Skouras defend himself to the Fox board of directors. Skouras entered the meeting fearing for his job, but after screening selected portions of the procession sequence, the board's attitude toward Skouras and Cleopatra had changed. Cleopatra was the film that would save 20th Century Fox. But one of Fox's major shareholders, former studio chief Darrell F. Zanuck, disagreed. He warned the board that Cleopatra was likely to sink the studio, and he let it be known that he was not about to let that happen.
Hey!
By the end of 1961, there was plenty of reason to be optimistic. Cleopatra was at last on a steady schedule. Almost half of the film had been shot, and Mankiewicz was writing a rich, visually compelling story. On January 5th, 1962, Cleopatra's cast and crew returned from a brief Christmas hiatus. Mankiewicz filmed this sequence where
Stab the heart.
In spite of the lovers' openness on the set, their spouses seemed oblivious to the romance. But Fox executives did notice. They feared news of the illicit affair would repel audiences and hurt any chance the film had of recovering its mammoth costs.
We were supposed to try to keep it quiet, which was ridiculous. Once it broke and broke wild, there was no stopping it.
When news of the liaison leaked out, Taylor and Burton became prime targets for Italy's eager paparazzi. Gossip was bought, sold, and published everywhere. And any photo of the two lovers was worth a small fortune. Even the mainstream news outlets began to print the story.
One day, Joe was so fed up, he said, look, boys, I'm going to give you the real scoop. Elizabeth's a beard, Richard and I are in love. So there was a big scuffle for a few minutes. And the next day, Richard came into the set and kissed him on the lips.
Eventually, the mushrooming press coverage took a terrible toll on Burton's marriage. In March 1962, Sybil Burton left Italy for England, although the move only served
just my luck, one of them will be Eddie Fisher.
For Eddie Fisher, the public humiliation was devastating.
Eddie Fisher was in really poor shape. She described him wandering the villa, not bathing, staying in his pajamas all day long.
Dad advised Eddie to go back to New York. He said, Eddie's really out of his league here with this romance. I mean, these two people will eat him alive. They're so in love with each other.
On March 19th, 1962, Eddie Fisher fled to New York. There, the public seemed to have forgotten his messy divorce from Debbie Reynolds. They now sympathized with the singer. But despite the off-screen problems, Mankiewicz still had a film to complete, and one pivotal and costly sequence was still unfinished: Cleopatra's triumphant procession into Rome. On May 8th, 1962, 6 months after the aborted first attempt to film the scene, cameras rolled as an endless parade of extras in exotic costumes swarmed through the Arch of Titus. But back in Hollywood, 20th Century Fox wasn't doing nearly as well. The studio was almost bankrupt, and in order to generate quick cash, executives began rushing films into production whether they were ready or not. One of these was a Marilyn Monroe vehicle entitled Something's Got to Give. But on June 8, 1962, after weeks of endless production delays, aggravated by Monroe's poor health and chronic absences, Something's Got to Give was shut down. It was another $3 million loss that Fox couldn't really afford. Fox was in the worst financial
And Dad always used to joke, we'd be driving out to the set and he would say, right now, the head of Fox in Hong Kong is taking 2 hookers to lunch and is being charged to my picture. I mean, there's no other place to put it.
Studio executives ordered Wanger and Mankiewicz to quickly wrap their costly lead actress. In a rush to complete the intricate barge scenes, the production company relocated to Anzio, a small coastal town in southern Italy. On June 23rd, the cameras rolled, capturing clouds of purple incense rising from burners and a gilded rigging that had cost $277,000 to build. By sundown that day, Taylor was finished. At last, the actress could return home, having earned a final fee of $7 million. But with several key battle scenes remaining to be filmed in Egypt, Fox executives once again lowered the boom.
We were still at Anzio, finishing up some sequences there one day when Walter Wanger was given the word that he was no longer on the picture and that his per diem was cut off and so on.
Wanger was crushed and humiliated. In an effort to save face, he begged Skouras to let him stay on in Rome at his own expense to the very end.
Being taken off the payroll of the film didn't trouble him. He was going to finish this film come hell to high water.
Desperate for revenue, Skouras and the Fox executives next set their sights on The Longest Day, Darryl Zanuck's epic World War II film about the Allied invasion of Normandy. They thought that if they cut the film's running time and rushed it into theaters, they could raise the dollars they so badly needed. In a bid to save his film and the studio he founded in 1935, Zanuck armed himself for the battle of his life. On June 27, 1962, Darryl F. Zanuck arrived in New York for the quarterly meeting of the Fox Board of Directors.
It was one of the most amazing performances I've ever seen in my life. He hit them on an emotional level as the founder of the company and absolutely attacked them And after a couple of hours of this tirade, they were totally wiped out, and he took over the company, and it was as simple as that.
When the smoke cleared, Skouras was out, and Zanuck was in. Joe Mankiewicz now had 3 months to complete Cleopatra before Darryl F. Zanuck took over. With time running out, Joe Mankiewicz moved his remaining cast and crew from Rome to Egypt, where the story's battle scenes would be filmed. But the production's money was also running out, and for the first time, Fox refused to open its checkbook.
The battle scenes that were planned, pressure was put on Joe to somehow trim them back to save time and money.
He believed in the director's vision so strongly that he even offered up his own paycheck, but Mankiewicz refused. The director was now a physical wreck, dependent on injections to keep him going.
They had given him so many shots, looking for a new place, they accidentally hit his sciatic nerve, and he couldn't walk. And he would be dragged through the sand, and I thought, geez, God, this thing is going to kill him.
Despite his intense pain, the director completed principal photography on July 24th, 1962. But for the first time since the production began, the footage being shot betrayed the last-minute lack of money. Returning to Los Angeles in August, Mankiewicz began the massive task of editing Cleopatra. For nearly a month, the director worked largely without supervision from the studio. But as Zanuck began asserting his power, he shut down all but the most necessary departments. He also installed his son, Richard, as head of production.
Cleopatra literally closed the doors of that studio. Everything was closed down. They didn't have any scripts ready that were worth anything. Nothing.
Leaving his son to oversee daily operations, Zanuck concentrated on rebuilding the studio's empty treasury. One available source of revenue was The Longest Day. And despite the studio's desperate finances, a big, splashy premiere was considered critical to the film's success.
The man responsible for the gala premiere, Darryl F. Zanuck, attends with Irina Demick, who plays the part of the underground heroine in The Longest Day. Now president of 20th Century Fox, The Longest Day was Mr. Zanuck's ultimate production before assuming his duties as chief executive. A final effort which elevates Miss Demick to stardom.
I was with him the night of the premiere, and I was sitting right next to him in Paris. He had Edith Piaf singing from the Eiffel Tower. What a night, what a showman he was.
Zanuck's epic was hailed as a monumental achievement in filmmaking, and The Longest Day would go on to gross over $18 million in its first year of release. But as Fox accountants waited for the badly needed money to trickle in, the Hollywood studio remained a ghost town.
There were no cars. The commissary was closed. Only the administration building had a few offices that were working. And there was the unit editing Cleopatra, that was it. There was nothing on the lot. No pictures in preparation. Nobody under contract. Nothing. And it was really eerie to look at.
In one of the few buildings that remained open, Mankiewicz diligently continued to cut Cleopatra.
Originally, Joe Mankiewicz wanted 2 movies, Antony and Cleopatra, Caesar and Cleopatra, as indeed William Shakespeare and George Bernard Shaw saw it. And they would have been 3 hours each.
Your gods and mine go with you, Caesar. The world, except for you, is filled with little men. Anthony, how?
Just looked at him and said, that Anthony's a weak man. And Dad said, yes, he is, Darryl. And Zanuck said to him, any woman did that to me, I'd kick her right in the balls.
Zanuck didn't only hate Anthony.
He had this wonderful statement when he was removed, saying, old Joe's worked in the cotton fields for a long time and he knows when Marse Darryl speaks. I mean, it was just dripping with Addison DeWitt out of All About Eve.
The studio boss and the dismissed director were now embroiled in a public brawl played out via letters and newspaper columns. But even an experienced storyteller like Zanuck could not make the jumbled bits and pieces of story fit. There had never been an actual shooting script. Frustrated, Zanuck found he needed help to salvage Cleopatra. He needed Joe Mankiewicz.
By the end of November, they were crawling back to have him come and do the rest of the thing.
He was persuaded that somebody was going to do it, so better he should do it and save the film from being disemboweled by someone who had never been there and didn't really know what the attempt was for the various scenes and so forth.
For weeks, Zanuck and Mankiewicz collaborated on cut after cut. But despite their differences, there was one thing on which both men agreed. The film's opening battle scenes looked cheap and unconvincing. Reluctantly, Zanuck ordered the sequence reshot. In February 1963, Mankiewicz reassembled his cast and crew in Almeria, Spain.
Find me dead. You're not sure why I'm dead, whether I was killed by the men, by the enemy, or did myself in. So there was a little confusion.
Rufio.
But Darryl Zanuck didn't have time to mourn the lost subtleties of the storyline. Fox was eager to get the film finished and into theaters.
Elizabeth Taylor as Cleopatra, Siren of the Nile. Her stunning beauty and notorious intrigue turned the tide of civilization.
Remember that I want you to forget me, please.
Forget? How? I can never be more far away from you than this.
The studio wanted to strike while the public interest in the Taylor-Burton affair was still at its peak. The premiere of Cleopatra was scheduled for June 12, 1963. As the film entered its final phase of post-production, Fox began to craft a marketing and promotional campaign unlike anything seen before.
Motion picture history in the making as Seymour Poe, 20th Century Fox Vice President in charge of distribution, meets the press in New York.
The Rivoli Theater in New York has presented to 20th Century Fox Corporation yesterday a certified check, which is the highest sum of money ever paid in the history of the entire entertainment business for any attraction to be exhibited by any means.
A $1,250,000 gesture of faith that Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton, and Rex Harrison, will be an all-time favorite.
Even at reserved seat prices, advanced sales of Cleopatra tickets did phenomenal business. By opening day, the film was sold out for 4 months.
This spring, Revlon brings you the new Cleopatra look, brilliantly translated into the most exciting and wearable look today. Today's Cleopatra wears a combination of Sphinx pink, a vividly light pink for lips and fingertips, and Sphinx eyes, a new idea in eye makeup. Together, the most exciting look in 2,000 springs.
You know, this isn't the most civilized look. It says plainly that you're still pretty basic. Like this pink, Sphinx pink, makes all other pinks look positively pallid.
The studio's publicity machine continued to make press by churning out everything from behind-the-scenes stories to historical pieces and articles on fashion.
A collection of chiffon evening gowns by Seal Chapman, inspired by the costumes of ancient Egypt in the time of Cleopatra.
I used to spend hours drawing on these incredible Cleopatra eyes. I can't believe it when I look at photos, and everybody did that. It was amazing to think about how that kind of filtered out everywhere.
Andy Warhol, for one, considered Cleopatra the most influential film of the 60s for style. Essentially, you have Vidal Sassoon's geometric haircut coming out of it. You have the pale lips, you have the heavily made-up eyes.
Playboy magazine's article on the women of Cleopatra offered even more proof that the film had invaded America's pop culture. But while nearly all the advanced publicity about the film was positive, 2 books released that summer did much to tarnish the film's gilded image. Written by Fox studio publicists Nathan Weiss and Jack Brodsky, the Cleopatra Papers included the author's private correspondence. The book shed a harsh light on the chaotic production and offered backstage insights into the Taylor-Burton love affair.
We got into a lot of trouble with the book. Nathan got fired by Stanley Kubrick because he was told that he would be persona non grata.
A second tell-all book, My Life with Cleopatra, was co-authored by producer Walter Wanger, who was still bitter over being cut out of Cleopatra's post-production process.
I once said to him, "Why do you want to write a book about this, Walter?" And he said, "Because I think this is going to be one of the great films of all time, and I don't want them to take my name off it. I want the world to know that I was the producer of this picture."
But the backstabbing books were the least of Zanuck's problems. As the final days before Cleopatra's premiere approached, the film's publicity campaign now faced a legal crisis.
The contracts were so convoluted that the huge sign that we put up in Times Square advertising the movie had the likeness of Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, as you would expect. And Rex Harrison's contract said equal likeness. So we had to repaint the sign and paint Rex in there.
A turnout of 10,000 New Yorkers jams Broadway for the world premiere of Cleopatra.
On June 12, 1963, fans lined up 10 feet deep in Times Square for Cleopatra's world premiere. In an unprecedented move, the NBC network set up a live remote crew to tape the event for The Tonight Show's late-night telecast.
You know what? We've arranged it now, finally. Mr. and Mrs. Mankiewicz had their picture taken before. They are right here, and I want to introduce them to you. Nice to see you. You, sir, congratulations.
Thank you.
A wonderful, wonderful achievement.
Well, you must know something I don't. But thank
Well,
you.
I must tell you, I do. Come in, please. Come in, please. Don't go away. Don't go away. Mr. Mankiewicz, I want to say, first of all, I want to ask you whether or not you are personally going to control the sound on the showing of Cleopatra tonight. That's been the rule.
No, I think everything connected with Cleopatra is beyond my control at the moment.
How does it feel now that the film is in the can, about to be presented? Is some of the tension gone? Is some of the... you feel a little more at ease now?
No, I don't think so. I feel as though the guillotine were about to drop.
Luckily, the New York Times gave Cleopatra a glowing review, calling the film surpassing entertainment and one of the great for general release.
He was very unhappy. If you can imagine taking a movie that's 6 hours long, edited 6 hours long, and throwing half of it out and squeezing it into 3.5 hours or whatever it was, clearly no artist would be happy with that. And he was sure afraid that it was not, knew that it was not going to be anything like what he wanted.
Roles that had already been trimmed down were now almost completely removed.
I was disappointed that whatever contribution I had made to the film, which was, I can't say was major, but was creditable, was diminished to, at the end of 10.5 months.
But sadly, a clerical error shut MacDougall out of the running. A mistake that caused the studio to offer a public apology to the actor.
The fact that he was nominated in the wrong category was a terrible blow. I know he was suggested as a leading star instead of as a supporting role. It was a great, great tragedy.
On April 13th, 1964, gold statuettes were picked up for Best Art Direction, Best Costuming, Best Cinematography, and Best Special Visual Effects. 4 Oscars in all. Yet despite the box office receipts and Academy Awards, bad press during the making of the film cemented Cleopatra's reputation as a dismal failure.
Cleopatra was notorious when it was released, absolutely notorious. Good, bad, or indifferent, it had become a film of such caricature notoriety that I don't think anybody could see the forest for the trees.
In truth, Cleopatra went on to become one of the top grossing films of the 1960s. It earned a staggering $24 million in its first release, although the final production cost of $44 million kept the film from breaking even for several years.
Eventually, the picture made $5.5 million, but our studio was missing.
Under Durrell and Richard Zanuck's leadership, 20th Century Fox quickly rebounded from its financial struggles. And thanks to a string of hits topped by The Sound of Music, by 1968, the studio was in the black and debt-free.
things were going good on all fronts, and we were able to reestablish ourselves as a force in the business and a force to be reckoned with.
As for Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, the pair would go on to star together in several films, including The VIPs and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, for which Taylor would win her second Oscar as the year's Best Actress. The couple's personal life also continued to be high-profile and headline-grabbing. They would marry not once, but twice before splitting up for good in 1976. For Rex Harrison, Cleopatra did little to tarnish his sterling screen image. Never again stepped behind a camera. But no one suffered as great a loss as the man who had lobbied to turn Cleopatra into a big-budget epic. Walter Wanger, the dapper Hollywood veteran of more than 60 films, never worked in Hollywood again.
He moved on, but I don't think he ever had the same sort of energy that he had had before that, the same kind of enthusiasm about a project. I mean, it took a huge piece of him, that film.
Cleopatra didn't only change the lives of the people associated with it. The film helped transform Hollywood itself.
I think that Cleopatra was the beginning of star power. I think it was the first time a star really wielded that enormous kind of power and commanded that kind of salary.
Cleopatra also demonstrated the folly of betting a studio's financial destiny on any one film, a lesson 20th Century Fox learned well.
We knew we had a budget that wasn't probably going to be achievable. You know, I think that was just that the danger of the picture was so intense that that was one that was just told sell it off, or sell off half, find a partner for half of it in case it doesn't work, that you don't cripple your company.
In the nearly 4 decades since the release of Cleopatra, a host of technological innovations have exploded across the globe. Cable and satellite television, as well as home video sales, have helped to offset the mounting costs of production. As a result, classic films that otherwise would have languished in studio vaults have received greater importance and increased The restoration effort also resulted in the retrieval and remastering of more than 2.5